Welcome to the next episode. I'm not sure which episode this is on my manual 330i touring that I'm basically doing a kind of restoration. It's not really a restoration, but I'm doing a big overhaul of the engine anyway because it had some issues with it. It was kind of wasn't running quite right, but also there's a lot of other things I wanted to do whilst I had the intake manifold off anyway. In the last episode we'd basically stripped the intake manifold out, stripped it all down, and I painted these, just the brackets that go on because why not? I had some black hammerite paint, so give it a spray of that, hopefully stop it rusting because it had a little bit of surface rust on. So I've done that, and now what I'm going to do is rebuild the intake manifold, put everything back on it, all these brackets, these hoses, things like that, and put on most of the CCV system anyway because I've got a new one of them, because I'm pretty sure it was a vacuum leak anyway that was causing the problem. That's what most of the people in the E46 group said. So got new CCV, a lot of other new things which are probably going to go on in this episode. Right, I'm going to start putting together this intake manifold again and all the various things that were attached to it. So cleaned her out nice and good with a jet wash and some brake cleaner and all that, so she's lovely and clean inside. That grommet still nice and rubbery, and it doesn't seem to have any cracks from what I can see. Give it a quick clean out in the middle anyway and it seems alright, so that's staying where it is. I'm going to start by putting this thing back on. I don't actually know what it is, but there you go. If in doubt, use force. I can't remember where anything goes. This is pretty much the only one that I can remember where it went. When you're doing this, I presume you're not going to be making a YouTube video, but I would advise filming or at least take pictures at pretty much every step, because I've pretty much forgotten how the majority of this goes back together. So I'm referring back to my footage, so I'm guessing most people will as well. Now this, I had to break the clamp off this, so I bought a few of these just screw down ones from B&Q because it's easy to get. So that was on there like that. This bracket has this little thing on which screws into there. That's the only threaded thing on here, so it'd be quite hard to mix that up. And then this is just like a push-in thing which goes in through that hole there. So there are those two clips back on there, and then that is going to go on there like that. And then this just screws back onto here. Do it the right way around anyway. Okay, before we put the CCV on, there's these three like ports here, two of which were blanked off with little rubber things. I'll show you them a bit closer. It's these three little things here. Now I actually saw someone in the forum say that they just epoxied up the unused holes, so bought some of that. It's high temperature stuff, suitable up to I did read it before, 150 degrees, so that should be okay. And I'm going to just epoxy on these little rubber things because this one is cracked and it probably still holds vacuum because it just gets sucked on there, but I'm going to do it anyway. Make sure you look back at the picture and you don't epoxy up the wrong one. So in my photo I've got that one and that one that had caps on, and that one did have a vacuum line coming off it that broke when I pulled the intake manifold, and I can't find the other end of it. I don't know where it went, so that'll be interesting. Okay, next I'm going to install the CCV system on the intake manifold anyway, and those little rubber things that the little rubber stoppers that we've just epoxied on there, there's another one which you should have taken off your old CCV because it goes on that little bit there, that little nipple type thing there. Now I'm not going to epoxy that one on in case my CCV system goes wrong again, or this one doesn't work quite properly, because I'm going to be honest, I went for the cheap eBay option for this. It did come with like I think a 3-year guarantee or something, so that's probably why I bought it. Now I have test fitted this already and the fitment isn't great. It's probably going to be better if you go for OEM obviously, but it'll do. On this thing, this pipe goes on it, right? You can see there's a little gap, and this pipe needs to go on to there like that, pushed on, and then it twists all the way around to lock into place, and then it's not going to come off. So what we're going to do is put this on, screw it in, and then put the pipe under the, see where it's pretty much going there, under that onto there, and twist it round up into place. So let's put that on there. That there is the pipe we were just talking about. Now you want to make sure this is in this orientation. That's on there, and then it's going to twist and go. You're going to twist it like we did before to lock it on, and it's going to go through this gap here. Like so. So basically it's going to come out on top here, because that is going to connect to that. However, before I put that onto that connector, because I went for a cheap eBay thing, because I'm on Muppet, I'm going to get this pipe on first, because that actually, this pipe connects into there, and that kind of touches that, and if, yeah, it's just a bit of a rubbish fitment, to be honest. These ones just push on. Oh, there we go. That's on properly. So let's try and get that on there. Bit of silicone grease again. Might put it on the outside here. Oh. Am I even doing that right? This is what happens when you buy the cheapest one on eBay. Great, that's come off anyway. Right, so what I'm actually going to do is put that end on first. I'm just scared something's going to break. Yes. Well, that wasn't easy. Now we can put this one back on. Make sure you push this one on properly, because those two clips basically have to clip around the outside of the edge of it. Should be a definitive click. Yes, that's got it. I'm going to have the joy of trying to get this one on. The fitment for that is pretty terrible, so this is going to be interesting. Well, camera battery just died, so I just put that in off camera. Now that was the hardest one to get in by far. I don't know if that's my cheap CCV that I bought from eBay, but that took me a while. I was absolutely pushing as hard as I could, and it was not going in. And I didn't really want to hammer it in case I broke the plastic there, but I just got a socket, put it on there, and hammered it, and it went straight in. So there you go. The CCV, the hard part, is on now anyway. There's only two hoses left. This one, which goes from there to the mine's gone blank, Vanos thingy. This one, which goes from the bottom to the dipstick tube. I'm going to put that on just before I put this on the car. Let's put this one on, and then that is pretty much our manifold built again. The intake air temperature sensor goes back into this little slot here. I forgot to put this on as well. This is some sort of breather for the fuel tank, I believe. I'm probably wrong there. If I am, I'll put it on the screen. But that just goes from that point there, and it actually slots onto the thing here. I'm going to put it underneath that CCV tube. Slots onto that holder there, and onto that there. I'm going to try and tackle this whole area now. So all this sludge down here I want to clean basically, and then throw some new parts on. So I've got new water pipes here. I've got this pipe and this pipe on the one that it connects to. I've got an oil filter housing gasket, and I've got a Vanos oil line here. I've got all new pulleys as well, but we're going to do that later. Now I was going to clean it up and then replace the housing gasket, and I realised that's probably the source of the leak, so it'd make a bit more sense to actually stop it leaking and then clean it. So we're going to do that. So to start off with, I think I'm going to get this wire out of the way. There's a connector here and a thermostat, just windings, and then there's two at the end here. One's one of the cam position sensors, and one is something else to do with the Vanos. Right. Wow, look how oily they are. I think that is from all the valve cover that's also leaking, which we'll replace at some point. Two 10mm bolts there and there that are holding this power steering reservoir on. And that can move out the way as well. Take off that electrical connector. Now this Vanos oil line's a 19mm nut on it, and these actually have washers either side. It's one of those special bolts. Okay, before I actually take the oil filter housing gasket off, I'm going to undo the oil filter just to let the oil actually drain out of the housing, because I've not drained the oil for this. I've read that you don't need to, but we'll find out in a sec if that's true. Because I want to use an engine flush with the oil that's in it before I put fresh oil in. Anyway, let's get this oil line out. Oh, there's hardly anything in there. So yeah, there's a washer either side of the oil line. You're also going to have to take the belt off, so you want a 16mm socket and a breaker bar just on the tensioner. So then you can pull the tensioner back and whip the belt off there. Some of them is like a Torx thing if you've got a hydraulic tension, I think. Hopefully it'll focus on it. Look how torn up that is. Now we need to get the alternator out of the way, so you've got two bolts really, well 3, so there's one on the top, and then if you try and follow this bracket down, underneath the tensioner there is another one which we need to try and undo. You can feel it, but I can't really show you it because I can't even see it myself. And there's another bolt here which holds on the power cable at the back. And then the cable comes off. To try and help you see where this bottom bolt is, my socket is attached to it now. So it's about there under between the tensioner. I can. There you go. There's an alternator with an air duct on the bottom. Wow, look at all that room. So it's got 6 bolts apparently. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And look at all that oil there. That looks fairly fresh to me. Yep. So that's most likely coming from that gasket. These are all 13mm bolts. I think while the oil filter housing is still on, and I've got leverage, I'll take the other end of this Vanos oil line off, because that might be difficult to do if they've got the housing in my hands and stuff. Oh, you twat. There you go, that's the old Vanos oil line. Let's have a look at this. Look at the sludge build up on that. Ew. It's going straight in the bin. Oh! Well, there you go. That came out and dripped oil all under the car. So I had a bit of cardboard under there, so it's not the end of the world. Well, I would say that's pretty much 100% proof of where the leak was coming from. I think, look at all the oil under there. That's just the oil that fell out now, but around there was loads of oil already, so it's obviously been leaking out there. You can even see on the actual surface where the oil has been seeping through, I think. And if you look at the actual old gasket in there, it pretty much looks like it's even recessed into the cavity where it sits. So I have to get a pick and try and dig that out. But yeah, that's definitely gone. I'm going to put some tissue in the hole where the gasket, where the housing goes, because I don't want any shit getting in there. Look at that, it's literally just broke off as I pulled it out. Oh. That bit's gone into the abyss. It's literally flaking off in pieces. Okay, so I think I've got all the old gasket out. This is what's left of it. Now this is supposed to be rubber, not what feels to me like plastic, the way it was breaking off in there. There we go, lovely new gasket that actually is going to seal, hopefully. Before we put the new one in, we need to clean both surfaces. I'm just going to use a clean cloth and a bit of brake cleaner, because brake cleaner is amazing and cleans everything. I'm going to try using this. This is a plastic trim tool. I don't want to use anything metal on it, but I've just seen people using scrapers to make sure the surface is perfectly clean. Fresh oil in here, and my new gasket, because you always want to make sure you lube up the gasket with oil, otherwise it probably won't seal properly.
Get a bit of fresh oil on there. Okay, so a new gasket is seated in there nice. It's got fresh oil on, ready to be put back together. So now we'll just give that surface a bit of a clean up and we can put the housing back on. Before I do that though, I might give that a bit of a clean there because that's a bit rank. Brake cleaner. Alright, now we have two very clean surfaces. I actually took the gasket out because I used brake cleaner on this to try and clean this up. I wasn't sure if brake cleaner would damage the rubber or not, but yeah, I tried to clean down there as best I can, but man, it's filthy. Look at this. Look at all the bits of shit that have come off that I've been trying to clean up. So yeah, put the gasket back in and we'll get it sealed up. Now these are torque, and the torque for these is 22 Newton meters. Oh, that is one of the most satisfying sounds in car mechanics, if you ask me. Don't think there's any particular pattern to do it in, but just do it in a crisscross pattern anyway, because why not? Well, don't forget to do up your oil filter housing cap again if you loosen that. It actually says on the top the torque for this is 25 Newton meters, but if you can't be bothered with that like me, you can pretty much just do it hand tight and you can feel it pretty much stop there anyway, and that's tight enough. So right, now I'm going to take off these coolant hoses and put the new ones on. I didn't actually get one of these hoses, forgot to buy one of them, but it looks in good condition. It's annoying my OCD that I'm not refreshing that as well, but there you go. Oh, bastard. Yes. Caught that by fishing with a magnet. I think I need to remove that one first actually, so... Change of plan again. I'm going to disconnect this hose here and then hopefully twist it up and be able to pull that one out. Well, more came out of that than I thought was going to. I don't know if you can see there, I literally just broke the pipe trying to pull that up and out. Oh, fucking idiot. Oh no. That has not done what I think it's done. So that pipe there should have two O-rings on like the new one, and I think it's broken off inside the fucking thing. So that's fantastic. So the end of this pipe connects to this pipe, which connects to the bottom of the expansion tank. So I'm going to take that off the expansion tank, get the new one on, so I can drop the car down again. So now it's easier for me to get in and hopefully see in that hole. These hoses come with the O-rings. This O-ring's inside there, and then this end, which goes into the engine anyway, has two O-rings on. So I'm actually just going to lube them up with a little bit of distilled water, because when I'm going to be putting fresh coolant in, you put in 50% distilled water, 50% coolant, and you can just, as long as they've got some sort of liquid on there, basically, it's not going to be dry, then you should be alright. So they're actually kind of keyed in a way, so there's slots at each end of the pipe which make it easier to put in. Now you can actually install them with the clip down. Sorry, I had the clip up then, but the clip can be down. Just push in and you'll hear a nice click, and there you go. That was really satisfying. So this needs to go that side of the expansion tank, and then to be honest, the electrical box here, all the connectors are undone anyway, so I can thread them over the top. So I'm going to leave that there and go underneath, and you just simply push the hose on like we did at that connection there. That one looks a bit knackered on the end as well. I hope that's not broken off inside. Right, so it's hard to see. Kind of there, those two holes right there are the holes that those pipes were just in. So in this hole to the left you can see the plastic bit that broke off the tube and is still there, and the same thing has happened in that hole, so I'm going to get a pick, try and pull them out. This is bits of the pipe that are breaking off as I try and pull it out, and I don't want it to get into the cooling ways. That's the main bit. Good job I properly looked in there, because that was in the hole. Right, I've plugged up the two coolant holes with a bit of tissue. I'm going to attempt to clean this. Now this is just pure sludge in here. That's a finger mark from where I've done it before. Look, the state of that. Don't even know what I'm going to do to get all that off. I think I'm just going to start by doing what I was doing there, but with some tissue. Try and basically pick up as much sludge as I can. Alright, the next thing I'm going to tackle is the engine mounts. You can see the absolute state of that engine mount down there. Okay, so what we have here is a very sketchy but hopefully successful way of lifting the engine up so we can get the engine mounts out. Saw 50's kid try this. I mean, he used a square block of wood, which was pretty much the right size to go under the sump, but I do not have one. This is pretty much the best bit of wood that I can find to use. So I'm trying it with this. Oh, this is nerve-wracking. You can see there when I jack like this, that's rising off the engine mount, which is what we want. I'll try and undo the bottom nut of the engine mount and we'll hopefully be able to get it out. Oh wow, that was tight. Got it though. Might be better off going through that one. Oh yeah, that's a much better one to go through. We're almost able to lift that out. I just need to jack the engine up a little bit more. Oh, and there we have half an engine mount because the top of it just fell off. Wow. So that is basically why you need to change your engine mounts. Look at that. I suspect that is an original BMW mount, completely and utterly shot. I'm going to try and give this a bit of a clean before we put it back together. Now I think it's probably going to be easier to put this engine mount in and set it in its place from up here rather than down there like we took it out. So I have my new mount here. I went for Cortico just simply because I saw a few people recommend it on the 46 forum, and if someone recommends something I'm more likely to buy it than an online review which I can't really trust. So we have a locator pin there basically and our thread, so just make sure they go in the right place. I think the locator pin goes towards the back of the car, but we'll find out in a second. Oh no, I'm wrong. The locator pin goes towards the front of the car. It's fairly obvious because you can't put the thread through the locator pin's place. Am I even going to be able to get this in? Ah yes, so technique to this, put the top thread through the hole and then you'll be able to put it down. And hopefully the engine will just fall on to where it goes. And that's in place. Now I'm hoping this engine is going to land where it needs to. I'm going to slowly drop the engine now and see what happens. Oh, look at that. Straight in. Oh. There you go, that's fully resting on the engine mount now. There we go, one new engine mount in that side. So I'm going to do the other side and then I think I'll torque them both after I've done the other side and the engine is sitting right on the mounts. There we go, and that's that side out. That's nowhere near as bad as the other side. I think it's probably because the other side had oil leaking onto it as well. which further helped deteriorate the rubber. Also, I'm not sure if the other side should have had this as well, but this one had this little top plate on, so we'll keep that where it was. Right, so that bolts into there, so you can see. Oh yes, that definitely felt like it went in properly. And this was held on by two 13mm bolts. Now I don't think these actually will have a torque, so I'm just going to do them tight but not too tight. Please tell me that's going to go in with that pipe there. Yes it is. Oh, there you go. That's in. That's quite good. When you push these in, you can feel it. You just know when it's in properly, which is good. So that one had a nut on there and a bolt in there. Alright, we potentially have an issue. I just noticed then that the starter motor is quite loose. And I noticed that that bolt at the back there is sticking out. So I just tried tightening it up, and it's very difficult to tighten up. I don't know if it's might be cross-threaded, so what I'm going to try and do is take the bolt all the way out and put it all the way back in, but I'm wondering why it's like that. Either it's been left like that or it's vibrated itself loose. Right, I finally managed to actually get that on. There's one bolt and the other one is hard to see, but it's down at the back there. So that starter is now firmly in place, so I can reconnect that water hose again. Hopefully that'll just push on like that, and then we can carry on. Or can we? Because I just found this is part of what a vacuum hose basically, and it was on the end of this. See it on there? It was there. So that hose, I can only presume, is the hose which was so frail it broke off when I pulled the manifold off. That was also on this little. So there's 1, 2, 3 vacuum nipple things on the intake manifold, 2 of which were blanks, and 1 had a super frail hose on when I pulled the manifold off. So I can only presume that that is that hose, which I do not have. So that means we cannot put the manifold back on today. For you it'll still be in the same video, but it's annoying for me because now I've got to wait a few days for that hose to come. Also, before I forget, there's actually a zip tie around these cables. I don't really know why, I don't think that's totally essential, but I'll put one, re-zip tie it anyway. So this cable was zip tied around there to that pipe, and that cable was there to that pipe. That's the engine knock sensor. Right, I've actually decided before we put the alternator back on, I'm going to change out my belt tensioner because I've got a new one of them. And then when we put the alternator back on, I'm going to be putting on a new, I think it's the idle pulley, that one's called. So for pulleys and tensioners and whatnot, I went for INA. They're apparently the OE brand, which means they are the people who made the original ones that BMW put in the car. So we have the tensioner here, nice and shiny. And then I actually bought 2 pulleys. I don't really know why now, looking at the car. I think this is the pulley that actually goes on there, but the same pulley is actually used on the air conditioning compressor tensioner, which I don't currently have, so I might be able to use that there, so I'll keep hold of that. And then this is the one that goes on the alternator. So this is our tensioner here. We've got 2 13mm bolts, one on the top here and one pretty much directly below it underneath the tensioner. That's the old one, a little bit shoddy, but it still works to be fair. So I think I will keep hold of that old one in case of an emergency, but yeah, nice fresh new one going on now. Now they are actually torqued, but I'll torque them up at the same time as I torque the pulley on the alternator. Right then, this is actually my second attempt at putting the alternator in because I dropped that bolt somewhere and I shit you not, I spent like half an hour to 40 minutes searching for it. Anyway, found it. So the alternator, the ducting needs to go down like that, basically, how it came out. And just make sure it's not caught on anything once the alternator is in its position. So the alternator will eventually sit there like that. But if you remember when we took it off, we took the top bolt out and then pulled it back this way really. So I'm going to do the opposite and pull it back, get the bottom bolt in, and then get the top one in. So I put this on and you can see the bolt doesn't reach, and this is the longer bolt of the two as well. So there's me thinking that the previous person who I thought removed this for whatever reason, removed this pulley for whatever reason, has put a shorter bolt in as well. So I've done some searching online and I found out that actually some cars came with one of these and some cars didn't. So I'm guessing basically my car just didn't come with one, because I mean it was running fine before I actually took the belts off. It was running okay. Maybe a bit of squeak from them I think, but yeah, there wasn't exactly any problems. So your car might have one, in which case you can change it, but check beforehand, because I didn't check and I just presumed that all cars had one, so make sure you check that. I did also read that some people have sort of done a modification in a way and added the idler pulley, and it'll basically help because it means that the water pump here, this top one, it'll wrap further around there and hopefully stop any belt slip, because I am going to be driving this car quite hard. But I think we'll leave that for quite a while and just see how it is. I think it'll be fine. So yeah, now I'm just going to swap the bolts back to how they were when I took them out. Then we're going to put this cable, needs to go back onto there, on the back of there. Do that now actually, with this plastic capped nut that just goes on there, and that's the alternator back together. Final step, we just need to torque up the tensioner that we replaced before, and that is 45 Newton meters. Why do I feel like that's just spinning? Oh, that's not just done what I think it's done. Fantastic. Snapped bolt. Turns out the torque for those are actually 24 Newton meters. I was wrong, so I guess I'm going to have to find another one of them bolts from somewhere. Brilliant. Next job I'm going to do, and try not to mess up, is this, which is the Vanos oil line, which just simply connects to there, where I've already got that bolt in, and where I've got that tissue, which you can finally pull out. So mine and yours should come with 4 washers. So basically one washer goes on the bolt like that, and it goes through the line, and then you put another washer on the other side, stick it in. Just going to do that down hand tight. Do the same at the top. Now you'll notice one end, that end has a slight kink in it. It's fairly easy to see how it lines up anyway. And this is torqued down to 32 Newton meters. That's definitely the right torque because I've checked. And I don't actually know how I'm going to get that one, because that ain't going to go on there. And I don't really want to remove that hose because that's got coolant in. I'll just tighten it, try and get a feel for how tight this one is, and then I'll do the same. I think that's probably about right. So this little O-ring I think is the last thing I can replace before putting the CCV on, which I'm currently, it won't be a wait for you, it'll be in the same video, but for me I'm waiting for a vacuum line to arrive, which goes from there, which I think is the vacuum pump, or yeah, pump or whatever it's called, to the actual intake manifold. And this O-ring goes on the end of the dipstick tube, which is here. So if you didn't undo the bolt when you took the intake manifold off like I did, there'll be a bolt just there to undo, and that's literally the only bolt. You undo that, and then there's a vacuum line which is clipped into the holder for it, which is dead easy to pull out. That's that out of the way. Don't know where that was going. How's that going? That's not good. Am I going to have to order some more vacuum line for that? Anyway, we'll deal with that in a minute. And then you literally just pull. The O-ring sits there where it goes into the sump. So this is our dipstick tube. Just watch, it's going to drip oil. Look at all the sludge around the top of there. Nice. So if the O-ring isn't round the top of there, it'll still be down there where I've actually just shoved some tissue, so hopefully I've not pushed it into the engine. That will not be good. So I'm going to clean that up as best I can. And while you're here, you'll have, with your CCV system, you should have another one of these hoses that goes onto the bottom of the oil separator thingy. And I don't really know what's going on with mine, but it's got like some sort of layer there or something. Aha! It's like hook a duck. And there's our O-ring, and as you can see, it's covered in what feels like gritty stuff, which obviously you don't want in your engine. I mean, the O-ring is actually still fairly rubbery and stuff, but you know, it's literally like a couple of quid, so I thought I'd replace it anyway. So I just stuck my finger in the dipstick hole. That sounds really wrong. Just stuck my finger in the dipstick hole, and yeah, that all is like cruddy stuff around the edge of it, so I'm going to try and clean that up, and then we can get the dipstick back in. There we go. That's that off. Just for reference, that's my new one, which will slide onto there and then onto the bottom of the CCV, and that does not look like it's big enough for there. Hopefully that just means it's going to be a good fit. I'm just going to spray some brake cleaner through this tube because my CCV, I think, is the original CCV, and it was very gunked up. So the point at which the oil actually returns is through this little bit here. It's not down the centre of that tube, that's where the actual dipstick is. So I'm just going to spray some brake cleaner through this bit here, and hopefully just make sure it's clear. Look at that. I mean, the colour of that that's coming out there isn't the colour of brake cleaner, I'm fairly sure, so obviously needed a bit of a clean. There you go, that's running clear now. So just hit that with a bit of silicone grease. Let's attempt to get this tube on, which does not look... Oh wow, that was a lot easier than expected. But that's definitely a good, snug fit. So I think, basically what I'm thinking is it's going to be easier to try and get that on the intake manifold whilst I'm getting it in than it is to get that on the end of the dipstick, which is right down there, whilst I'm wrestling with the intake manifold. So that's on and ready to go in. It probably needs to twist a bit. I think it goes, probably more goes that way, because the dipstick goes in like that. So yeah, bit of oil around that. O-ring on said dipstick. Dipstick in said hole. I thought this would be a very easy job. Turns out it has to have quite a good click in, and you know when it's in apparently. I've read on the forums, and lots of people have struggled with this, not seating in properly because obviously it's brand new O-rings. So some people said try silicone grease, but I was worried about that getting in the oil, but I'm going to try it anyway because I'm going to be changing the oil. So silicone grease is our last option. Right, I'm going to try and explain how I managed to get that dipstick tubing, because it was not easy, and this is kind of my only way of explaining it. So the dipstick tube, the place where the tube goes into has a little ridge kind of like this. So the actual O-ring sits on the ridge like that. So it's like that basically, and it's not going to fall into the sump then. And then there's another ridge which is on the dipstick tube itself, which is where I previously put the O-ring up to when I put it on the tube. And that goes down to there, so it basically sandwiches the O-ring together there, and that's how it stops it leaking. So to get that on there is basically not easy because the actual tube itself is really tight. So if you imagine we've got a tube here, which is my hand, that O-ring then has to go into that tube, and that was what was being like difficult basically. So I pulled the dipstick kind of halfway out, so this was still around the tube, and then I poked this sort of down with a trim tool, plastic one, because I didn't want to score anything or scratch anything with a screwdriver, and poked it down onto the ridge, and then I could push the dipstick down on top of it. I did think about just putting the O-ring in and trying to seat it in the ridge and then put the dipstick tube in, but if I did that, I was worried that the dipstick tube would actually just push the O-ring straight down into the sump. So hopefully that explains to you in a way of how I got it in. But yeah, that's that. So there you go. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you've learned something along with me doing this. This is my first project car. I'm kind of learning as I go. Basically spending a lot of time watching 50s Kid on YouTube and reading in the forums and stuff to basically learn about this car. And to be honest, it's actually quite good to work on. For someone who hasn't worked on cars before anyway, this is fairly easy, dare I say, to work on. Once you've watched enough videos, you really start to get a feel for just how everything goes together, and I think I can remember how it all goes back together, but we'll find out in the next episode. So subscribe, leave a comment, do all that stuff, and yeah, I'll see you in the next episode.